For those of you who may not yet be aware, I'm working up a comedy act right now, and Kathy has kindly consented to allow me to test some new material here at Toastmasters meetings. And personally, I'd probably prefer to have an audience that isn't composed of people who are paying to learn how to do this, but I imagine you probably prefer someone who knows how to do comedy. So don't feel any obligation to be polite. Just try not to laugh more than you have to. We can both be out of here that much quicker. Pardon me. Don't feel like you have to stay for the whole presentation either, and don't worry about distracting me. I don't usually hold grudges for more than 1 month. I don't actually expect when I finish up that there's not going to be anybody left when I'm finished. It's actually easier for me because I tend to heal faster when fewer people are beating me. And if it gets bloody, I just so you know.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Because I'm timing. Because we said you're going to do 20 minutes before the break.
I know where my 10-minute point is.
So. Oh, you're going to do that.
Give them a flash of the light to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. And if we're having so much fun we don't want you to stop, we'll let you know.
Okay, okay. And I guess what I was trying to say is that if it does get bloody, I don't have anything you could catch. Maybe a clue. No, I'm sorry about that. I guess what I'm saying is that if it does get bloody, your stains are your expense. And anything more than 6 blows, I'm going to have to count that as personal services. And anything more than 10, I'm going to need a damage deposit up front. Now, just in case you're concerned about the content, as I suggested earlier to Kathy, I'm trying to start this very clean and PG, but it does get a little bit CBC prime time later on. So if you're easily offended, this will give you plenty of time to leave before I get personal. I don't want to use any 4-letter words, although there will be discussions of certain body parts and alternative fuels. So, words are wise. Now, if you're at the last meeting I spoke at, you know that I recently made a relatively major discovery about the nature of comedy, and I've since found out that I'm probably one of the few people in North America who figured out the evolutionary purpose of comedy. And I'd like to be able to tell you what it is, but it's a little bit, there are implications to it. Maybe one way I could put this is, when that chicken crossed the road, it turns out that the other side kind of has 2 meanings. And we leave out the part that chickens crossing roads don't dodge traffic very well. And I'm sorry to be so cryptic about this, but I'd rather not go into the sexual connotations of the knock-knock joke. Just a couple of clues. Yeah, in primitive cultures, doors didn't have to be square, and we didn't always knock with our knuckles. Now, getting back to this, it's just a couple of steps from knowing the purpose of comedy to having a theory for it, and from there a formula for creating more or less perfect comedy. And I'd like to be able to say that I created a perfect routine for you tonight, but I really just created my perfect routine. So if you don't find the material funny, it's not because it isn't funny, it's just that you're not seeing things from my perspective. And if you were my clones, you would need extra underwear. Just if you identify with me at all, just a word to the wise, you maybe check for leaks in the basement every now and then. Clenching exercises help. Anyway, interesting observation about this theory. It turns out that most comics over the last 50 years will write about something without even knowing it. And what I mean by that is, comics like to say that comedy is a lot like sex, or what they've heard sex is supposed to be like. And a lot of them say that as a setup to a routine or a joke. Maybe some of them wanted to say it just to hear themselves say sex on stage. I guess that was a big thing back in the 60s, you know. Sex. Anyway, the thing is, it turns out that comedy really is more like sex than anyone realized. It has nothing to do with making love, by the way. It actually has a lot more to do with making pudding. And I'm going somewhere with that. I'm not just saying that to have a chance to say pudding. But a lot of comics would want to compare comedy with sex and then sort of back off to something softer, like good comedies like golf, or good comedies like A Wet Duck, or something silly like comedies like eating a peanut butter sandwich in church, which I'm not saying anybody ever actually used it, but you could make it work, and sticks to the roof of your mouth, and dangerous peanut butter allergies, that much closer to God, that sort of thing. Anyway, my favorite example was good comedy is like a Jell-O pudding pop. And I know that's a Bill Cosby, and I would have done it as Cosby, but my Cosby sort of sounds a lot more like Dudley Do-Right. In his defense, Cosby would never be caught dead using a sex analogy, so pudding pop isn't a bad one. I mean, I guess a lot of other comics actually use that one too, although I think a lot of them were just making fun of Cosby. It's a fun hobby, but I mean, well, I guess I'm glad he didn't use chocolate pudding. The first time I saw him use that analogy, I was on that Jell-O special. I think he did in the 80s. It's really hilarious now because he took it so seriously, but it looks so stupid now. Because when you think about it, if Jell-O pudding pops are a lot like comedy, that means that Jell-O pudding pops are a lot like sex, and it kind of confirms every creepy feeling I ever had about Cosby. So I don't know if this was part of the show or if it was in the commercials, but he had these kids sat down at the blackboard, and he had the, I don't know if you remember this, the diagram of the pudding pop and the comedian over on the other side, and he had this whole explanation laid out for how, the skim milk is your memory, and the sugar is the actual jokes, and the stick is the venue, and tricalcium phosphate is the instinctive centers of the brain, and tartaric acid was like the transmission delay at synaptic junction, which looks really good on the blackboard. But, I mean, if you know anything about food science, nobody's going to be eating that pudding. And when he gets to the guar gum, don't get me wrong, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, when he gets to the guar gum, I wish he hadn't gone there because, I'm not racist. I mean, I think he was absolutely right about caramel color being base animal instincts. I know there's a school of thought that says that it's more to do with fear of the unknown or fear of the unfamiliar. But I mean, when people say that, you kind of know where they're going with that, right? And it's just that kind of bad food science that gives people license to, especially black comics making jokes about white guys with no asses, and I really don't like being reminded of that. So are we clear on that? Caramel color, base animal instincts, no argument for me. But from there, I mean, it just gets really, for me, really stupid, because if hecklers represent the scum on the top of the pudding, which is my favorite part, then the guar gum can't be the setup line, because then what the hell is the cornstarch for? Cornstarch can't be the alcohol, the alcohol license, liquor license for the club, because it already represents the alcohol. And then what is guar gum? The only thing that makes sense is that it's either the alcohol advertising in the club, or it's that beggar that goes around to your table between sets and tries to sell you, the pens and the buttons and those little cards and stuff, and he tries to, show how he's handicapped, but you kind of know that really he just likes to sell stuff. But I just laughed when I heard that. I mean, and here are these kids sitting in front of the blackboard with this icon of entertainment trying to explain how, I'm sorry, I skipped something. The dumbest part about this whole thing is, you're not going to believe this, Jell-O doesn't even use guar gum. They use xanthan gum. They've never used guar gum. And I just died when I heard that, because here's this icon of entertainment sitting with these kids trying to tell them how the secondary binding agent in comedy is an ingredient that Jell-O doesn't even use. And how many people actually saw that?
Okay, we saw it.
Oh, good. I thought I dreamed it. Anyway, if you get a chance to have that dream, I really recommend you see it. Cosby knows absolutely nothing about food science, and it's right in your face. Anyway, I better stop there. Okay, so we were discussing the similarities between comedy and sex. So we can go over some obvious similarities. To start with, sex and comedy both involve emotional and physical arousal. You're not going to laugh if you're not at least a little bit relaxed and turned on. Emotionally, I mean, although, you know, whatever works for you. Both sex and comedy require careful attention to communication as well. You have to pay attention to what the performer's doing, and the performer has to pay attention to you. Otherwise, you know, things start falling out, and spill stuff on the bed table, and she starts complaining about her arm going to sleep, and eventually somebody gets a knuckle in the eye, and you have to go down to the den and finish off by yourself. But enough about me. Sex and comedy also have a rhythm of rising and falling emotions and sensations. But it's not really a team effort. One person has to do most of the work for the other person to really enjoy it. And it's the same with sex. You work together on the rhythm, but the comedian does most of the work. You know, you might tell the audience to turn over, or, you know, put your leg like this, but the performer has to do most of the work, or you're going to feel a little bit cheated. Because, I mean, when you go out to a comedy club, and then what after all are you paying for? Not that I'm implying that anybody here would have to pay for, I'm talking about comedy, of course. Also, for the sex to be good, you have to manage the intensity, or it's over really quickly. It's the same with comedy. You can always get really intense comedy on TV for about 7 to 10 minutes, but it's not really the same because there's no commercial breaks in sex. Although I have heard that Universal's trying it with a couple of places near Reno, but for the most part, there are no commercial breaks in sex. And I thought this was interesting. I'm going to start laughing in a minute. I'm going to need somebody to volunteer, someone hopefully with a sadistic streak.
Well, that would be me.
No, you put your hand up too quickly. Kathy, could you come up here and help me for a second? Do you know how to do an Indian burn?
An Indian brew, that's
Yeah, okay. I need you to do an Indian burn on me. No, not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough. Ah, that's good, that's good, that's good. Okay, now, if I give you the thumbs up, that means I want it. If I give you the thumbs down, back off a little bit for me, and to help keep you steady here, okay?
Are you ready?
Yeah, okay. Now, I thought this was interesting. When you go to see a comedy performance, you expect to be entertained. I mean, you want to laugh. But with comedy, there's always the heckler factor. And anytime there's more than a few people gathered together to watch comedy, there's always somebody who wants to ruin it and distract everybody else. And apparently, it has a parallel in sex. Now, before I say this, in comedy, the comedian is always male, and that's fine, that's fine. I'll let you know when I really need you.
Okay.
In comedy, the comedian, the performer is always male, and the audience is always female, even if they're not. And as it was explained to me, it doesn't matter how much a woman wants sex. She's always got this inner heckler that just, you know, wants you to get off her so she can get some sleep. And well, an old girlfriend told me that all women have that. So it's kind of a good thing that comics can handle hecklers better than most men can handle things in the bedroom, because you wouldn't want to hear me hear a comic go with a heckler say, just give me please another 2 or 3 minutes. I'll buy you those drinks you wanted. Sex and comedy also involve very strong social taboos, so they can both cause shame, which you already knew. I think we've all had that moment where we realized we just come out of a comedy club, we wouldn't be seen dead-eyed if we were sober, or that moment the next day when you go in and sit on the toilet and you can't believe what you were laughing at the night before, or that really awkward moment when you head back to the bedroom and you realize that the comic is still there and thinks he's going to get free breakfast out of the deal, and have to explain to your wife why there's all that extra laundry. Anyway, we don't learn, do we? Anyway, that sort of leads to the next similarity between sex and comedy, which is that they both involve terror. With sex, it's terror of an communicable disease, or if you're women, pregnancy, or if you're a man, long-term commitment. And with sex, the terror, with comedy, the terror can be about inappropriate laughter, or hearing a joke that gives you that, Uncle Bruce type of feeling. And the worst of it is that, that sensation of cold horror, like you get when, it's lunchtime and you realize the comic isn't leaving. And there's also something called a shame spiral, or a terror spiral, that can happen where it just becomes a self-perpetuating cycle of sex and comedy and sex and comedy. And eventually it's sex with comedians, and then you're at comedy clubs for the meat market action, which is a really stupid idea, by the way. And eventually you're waking up in small-town hotels with, but enough about me. Yeah, you'd think we'd learn, right? Anyway, I need to stop for a moment because I got ahead of myself, and there is something I forgot. I am a man, a real man, not just for the sake of comedy. So of course, we're now several minutes into this entertaining little intercourse, and I just realized I've forgotten something pretty important. Keeping in mind the sex theme, anybody know what it is? Okay, well, it was the foreplay. It's the male's responsibility, the comic, to warm up the female, the audience. Now, just so you know, this is going to sound a little bit forced and artificial, but I am playing the man's role after all, so at least we got some consistency. And keep in mind that I'm not very experienced at this. I'm really not lying. I haven't been with any other audiences before you. So let's get right to some warm-up jokes. So, how are you tonight? You ever notice that the older you get, the longer it takes to realize that you're watching a rerun? Now, I told that joke knowing that it might not get a response. A good lover always starts really soft to find out how his partner's going to respond, which is important in comedy too, because not all audiences are as sophisticated and as attentive as you are. And you see how I threw in that phony compliment there just to make you feel better. Something else, something good comics will do, and a good lover would also do. And I'm also going to take a risk here and see how you respond. Because if I'm going to be a good performer or a good lover, I need to know how sensitive you are and how far you're going to let me go with you. Because you might be all drunk and rowdy, but there might be still certain things I can't say and places I shouldn't put my fingers, and you might just pass out on me, figuratively speaking, of course. So here's my sensitivity test joke. Guys, whenever you fart silently in public. Now, you see what I just did there? I took a chance, I went right for a toilet joke. So, like a good lover, I'm going to really pay attention to you guys and see how you react next. Or I would if I was actually a professional, but I'm just going to let it rip. Guys, whenever you fart silently in public, you realize it wasn't one of those special deodorized farts we all had maybe one time before.
Okay.
And in about 10 seconds, everybody's going to know it was yours. Well, if you can't cover it, here's what you do. Okay, first you put your hand under your arm like this, and you sort of look around, see if as if you're looking to see if anybody's checking. Then slowly go like this. Now, two things are going to happen. One, if anyone's watching, they're going to give you all kinds of credit for creativity. Second, if anyone in that room is high, in 2 seconds they are totally going to lose it. Now, I have to focus back on you again, make sure that you're still interested. In sex, this is where a man should have a go-to move, and then he knows the woman can, will usually react to. This way, the guy, the comic, can tell how interested you, the audience, are. So it's usually a good idea to introduce the move so that it doesn't startle anybody. So I introduce it like this. I know it's a little late in the game, but every comic has their signature suicide bomber joke. And here's mine. And before I do this, I just want to say, if there's anyone here who is a suicide bomber, you're going to be offended. But try and live with it. You won't have to live with it for very long now, will you? So, knock, knock. Who's there? 72 virgins. Oh, camel snot. It was the blue wire. So every comic has a few of these go-to jokes, go-to moves in his pocket. I think I'm going to be safe now. But thank you very much.
Oh, all right, that's good.
Yeah, the gas pan will help keep me going from here. So when I use these jokes later in the show, they're not really foreplay anymore. They're actually more barometer jokes to let me know when I'm stepping over the line, or maybe even finding out that you want me to go farther than I've already gone. And you guys are pretty dirty, but you have to think about the venue as well. And this is kind of, I guess, like, sleeping in your parents' guest bedroom. And so don't worry, I'm not going to get too loud or too messy. We don't want one of those awkward moments over breakfast, especially with a relationship this shaky. So this is the halfway point, actually.